So you create your own search list.
So it's just a task list. Okay, I want to go back and look at this one. I want to go look at this one. That's all it's doing.
Yeah, it's just going to be a list of the places you're going to go look. So there's the main thing. Now you could go down through this and choose the ones you wanted. So you have all of these different records. But what the point here is that it has now, the program has now shown you, the catalog here, has shown you the types of records that may exist up here in this top layer, and the types of things you're going to have to search to find that. And people will make, I mean, I hear this all the time. I'll go down, it'll say something like military records, and I'll go, and they'll say, well, I don't know if anybody in my family was in the military, so why would I search the military records? And I go, then don't search it. Then how will you ever know if it's there? So, I mean, you know, that's the answer. I mean, if you don't do the search, you don't know if it's there. So that's the kind of thing that you might want to consider. Now, in addition to that, you can go here, the next step. So we can move down from the top layer down to the next layer, and that's by clicking on this link at the top of the page that says places within England. And now we have
Counties.
all the counties. And so we can go over here to, did we say Yorkshire?
Yorkshire, yeah.
So we have York and Yorkshire. And you might notice here in England that most of these have two different names. Now, why is that? That's because about 1960, whatever, 3 or 4, whenever it was, they decided to rename all the counties and rearrange the boundaries. Okay? And if you think that makes a big difference, all you have to do is just go back and realize that there are still people who are legislating in the government to go back the way it was. They're still upset with it. Okay, they'll probably be for generations upset. But, so we'll check, and then we go to Yorkshire, and then when we're in Yorkshire, here's the next list. So here's another list of all the kinds of records we have in Yorkshire. We have the same thing, so we go here to vital records, and we've got all these different vital records that might apply to our person, depending on the time period and where we are. And another thing you'll notice when we're doing this is we're going from a general area down to a smaller area, down to a smaller area, down to a smaller area, and we're getting more focused on the actual place that this occurred. Okay, and then we have the next layer of records, so we go back up, and we have places within Yorkshire. Now here's all the places in Yorkshire. Take your pick.
Kirkdike.
What?
Kirkdike. K-I-R-K, capital D-E-I-G-H-T-I.
Okay, let's get down here to the K's. Kirk. K-I-R-K. Oh, we have to go back to the top.
Maybe it's... Or that other Kirk thing, oh, now you used
Okay, Kirk.
I don't know.
Kirk Burton, Kirk.
There's a Kirby. Could be over. Just do that. Go back up and do Kirby over. Throw or over something.
Overblow?
You can't see it from here.
Kirby overblow?
Yeah.
So down about... Oh, Kirkby. Kirkby overblow.
Down.
So down about 10.
Overthrow or overblow.
Down about 5. Right.
Right there?
Yeah, that'll do.
Okay. Okay, now here we are in that place, and the records that exist down there at the lowest level, right here. Okay, so the question that I'm asked continually is, are these duplicative every time you're going to get the same records? The answer is no. As you keep moving down, you get more specific records, and they are not duplicative of the ones before. So instead of going through, if you have not gone through this whole process of going through the letters, whether you start at the bottom or the top, that's up to you. You know, you just got to remember that you've got to keep going up, looking for records as you keep looking.
So at the country level, it looked like there were some, within that collection at the country level, there were some subdivisions in some of those collections. And I think what you just told me is, yeah, that might be true, but when I get down to like a county level, that's a different set of stuff. It's not duplicated between those
Yeah.
two.
Right.
Necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
So you've got to keep going down through, because there's going to be new records that were cataloged exactly. You know, it depends on the cataloging system, but generally speaking, a military record, for example, created in England would not show up at the county level.
Right. When we looked at England, I thought I saw something for York or Yorkshire as listed.
And that might be a generalized record about England. I was talking to somebody the other day. In fact, I wrote a thing on it, just a little note that said, when I wrote on my blog, I said a little thing about the Scottish election to try to see whether they were going to stay in the United Kingdom. Well, they did stay in the United Kingdom, but my point was, if they separate, that will have an impact on genealogy. And I got to think back and said, no, 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 it would not affect us at all. We don't really care, blah, 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 blah. And I went, you don't have a clue. Okay, so, you know, when the things happen like that, there is a division of the records. And for example, if Scotland were an entirely separate, independent country, not part of the United Kingdom, their military records would no longer be kept in England. I can tell you that. They're not going to ship them to the British Museum. They're going to keep them in Scotland.
That must be why the vote failed.
Yeah, and an interesting thing, and I've shown this before, but in the other classes, but it occurs to me it's a good thing to show. This is the Newberry Atlas of Historical County Boundaries. This is a free program from the Newberry Library in Chicago, and basically covers every boundary change of every state and every county in the United States since 1640. And so if you come in here, like to Pennsylvania, for an example, then you can have an interactive map that shows you where those records, where the counties were at any given time. So in 1776, the black lines are the counties at the time, the white lines are the present counties. Okay, so if you look here to Northumberland County, for example, and you look at all the white lines in there, you realize that every one of those counties is now in existence from that one county. So if you go back and they said they were, your person was born or had an event occur in Northumberland County, then what happens to that event? Well, it starts, for example, over here. Let's say you were clear over here in the eastern part of the county, and you went over here, you know, and the counties were divided and divided and divided. Well, you can use the programs to see exactly what year they were all divided, when they were created, how the boundaries shifted and everything. Okay, so you've got that, but realize that the question I ask is, okay, they were born in Northumberland County in 1776, where are the records? And people would say, well, we're born in Northumberland County, so the records are in Northumberland County. Well, Northumberland County today is just one of those little tiny little counties there. And if you can imagine this scenario, we have, I don't have any records in my hands, I usually have a pile of books or something. But we can imagine this. I'm the old county, and you're the new county, and you come and we're going to divide our county, and I say to you, well, you're going to new county, you take all the records, I don't want them. So you get the records. Okay? Or the opposite. You're the new county, I'm the old county, and I say, these are my records, you're not going to have them, you make your own records.
From now on,
you start your own records.
Yeah.
I was dealing with that just this morning. Evidently, with the handy book and an atlas, and I was trying to find out exactly what county Mount Pisgah was when this ancestor died, way back. So, the example they gave, that there was a county in Utah called Cedar County, and I don't know what it was part of or what it was part of now, but whatever happened to those records, the book stated that they were, when the counties changed, the records from Cedar County went to the Utah State Archives.
Sometimes. That was the third. That was the third option.
Yeah,
the third option is both of us are looking at each other and say, neither one of us want this pile of records. Let's ship them to the state.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Okay, so they send them to the state. So the state gets the records, and we start new records from that point. Okay, so those are three of the options. Now, let's suppose that you did that, and this guy was here, and your guy was born over here. Okay, he's in Northumberland County, but they formed a new county. The problem is that those records, as they were created, every one of those transactions could have put them into a different county.
Right.
And they could have migrated all the way up to the furthest point away.
So you'd have to check various dates to see what that evolution.
So the answer is,
could have been.
this little thing about place has got to be at the time, but you've got to be aware of this jurisdictional pile to know what happened to the records. And this is really simple in the United States. It's not a really difficult problem. It's a problem sometimes finding where the records went, but it's not really a conceptually difficult problem. Where it becomes conceptually difficult is in the middle of Europe. Okay, because I have people come to me and I'll say, well, we're looking for my great-great-great-grandfather and we can't find him. Well, where was he born? In Germany. When? 1830. I go, well, that's nice. There was no Germany in 1830. So let's start someplace else. Where was he really born? Well, I don't know, but it said Germany on the census record. You know, I say, well, okay, now we have to find out where he was really born because Germany doesn't help us at all. And if that's another class, but we could go through all that, all these boundary changes that happen. But I was using this as an example of the need to know the place. So the answer here is by the time you come down here, you better know what the place is. And we had this discussion this morning, and I made this comment that I've said many, many times before, and that is, if your ancestors came from Scandinavia, I can probably guess, and I can, unless you are just absolutely the most, unless you were raised on genealogy and you are just living and breathing it, I can guess that 80% of your place names are wrong.
For example, all the early people are listed in Utah when it was only a territory. Do I have to go back and change all those to territory of desert, whatever it was?
The answer is it should be at the place it existed at the time it existed.
Yeah, so that.
And you'll find the records because you're going to, it's not, like I said, it's not really a crucial thing in the United States. But I did come across one that I wrote about a week or so ago, and it was somebody who claimed that my ancestor, going back on my line, had on Family Tree, was born in, and they had stopped with the one that they knew about, whose name was Sprague, and then they went to Mr. Sprague and Mrs. Sprague. And Mr. Sprague and Mrs. Sprague were born about 1530 in South Kingston, Washington County, Rhode Island, United States. Okay, now that was not helpful to me. In fact, it's totally made up. There is no excuse for that. It's basically out of fantasy. Because, well, for example, Roger Williams didn't even get to the place they call Rhode Island until years after that. And there was no United States, and there was no South Kingston, and there was no Washington County. Okay, so where was the people born? Well, they obviously were not born in a little log cabin on the shore of the ocean on the coast of Rhode Island in 1530. Because if they were the only white men in the whole state. Okay, that's the answer to that one. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're using this to let us understand that finding the exact place is important. Now, Kirby Overblow. If my family had come from there, I would want to know what that was. So I would, Kirkby, I would go here and I would get, first of all, I would also go out and see if there were any more records about that. I'm not going to get it, so I'm going to have to type it. So I would go out here to the maps. And I would look at the map, and I would type in really kind of interested to see what this place looks like. Oh, didn't get in the
Blair West Riding.
So there we go. Up there it is. Kirkby Overblow, United Kingdom. There it is. There's All Saints Church, Kirkby Overblow. And so we can zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, and and zoom out until we figure out where this place is. I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me yet. We haven't hit anything. Marigate, that's not quite there. Leeds, okay, that tells me where it is. Okay, now we know where it is. And we've kind of got it in our head what this place is. But in addition, we'd like to know a little bit more about it. Why? Because I'm that kind of person. I need to know what I'm looking for and to see if it actually works. We've already found one thing. We found that there's a church right there. So that's probably the first place we go to look for records. But we also want to see what this place looked like. So we pull out the little guy in the corner and we put him down on the street. And we put him right in front of the church. And there we are. And we're right there. Oh, there's the cemetery. There's the church. Okay, so now we can drive down the street.
Just a little lane.
And that's probably the entrance to the church. There it is. There's the church. Okay. So now we can keep driving around the town. Down here we have the map. We have a map that we can switch back to the map. And so we can figure out, you know, if we want to get here, we want to go here and see if that's closer to where we want to be on the church. I think that's where I just was. No, this all looks the same.
Is this part of Google Maps?
This is Google Maps, not part of. This is Google Maps. Yeah. And the little guy down here used to be called Pigman. They don't call him that anymore, but you can do. But see, the advantage is here, I am driving around in this town, and now I'm picking up more information about the place and giving me ideas of records that I could find from there. I've seen a church, I've got the name of the church, so what do I want to do? I get on the phone, I pick up the phone, call the guy over there, and if I can understand him, I wish they had subtitles on phones, but they don't. But if I talk to the guy, then I can probably come up with the rector or whoever, and I can find out where the records are. Well, where are your records? Well, we'll have them right here, you know. And so we know if they've been there, or if they've ever been digitized, or if they're now, how much do I have to pay to look at them? Kind of thing. Or is there someplace else? Well, yes, we gave them to the Historical Society. They've all been transcribed. They're all available on the society map, on the society's website. Okay, but they'll tell you where those records are located. And so now as you kind of drive around, you can get the same thing. And this is the same thing in any country. So any place you want to go in the world, you simply do a little bit of exploration. One time we had somebody came in and asked me that they wanted to find their great-great-uncle or great-uncle who they knew was a reverend, but they didn't know anything else about him. They just knew his name was Reverend so-and-so. And so we looked for him in Ancestry. We found a city directory that gave an address. So we popped that address into the maps, and then we started driving around, and 2 blocks away we found a church. Probably the one he worked at, because he probably wouldn't live close to somebody else's church. So you could tell right there the name of the church, so I just said, call this church and see. You'd probably find out that he was the pastor or whatever, the minister of the church, and you're on your way. But the confirming thing was, the guy said, well, yeah, that's probably the right church because that's the kind of church that we all belong to. So, you know, so there's the thing. But this way, you're able to go actually look and examine these places and even see the house where the people lived. These houses look old enough. These are the style houses that were probably built 300 years ago, or even longer. So you're, you know, just as a guess. Okay, so let's go back now. We're through here. We're going to go to the books. And the next thing you need to know is that FamilySearch has over 150,000 digitized genealogy, family history, local history books. This is the largest collection that I know of online. I mean, we have big collections, but they're not focused, or they're not all digitized, but they're not all on genealogy or whatever. This is all genealogy material. It comes from all these different libraries, and it keeps growing, more and more books all the time. If you look for it, here you're just going to do a search for your people or places or whatever you want to look for. And so if I put in Tanner, Arizona Pioneer, and hit the button, then I get Henry Martin Tanner, my great-grandfather, Joseph City, Arizona Pioneer. If I click on that, it will then download, clicking again, it will download a copy of that book, a full copy, which I can then save off to my computer and search and do anything. I could reprint it if I wanted to, or whatever. Now, I would never print it because I don't need more paper. But this, so here, and I can search this. So I can search all through this book, and if I save it off as a PDF, then I can use Adobe Reader to search through and search every word in the book.
So that's
So
what
I can
you
do that with all the books that
you
are in
save it
there.
as a PDF file?
Mm-hmm. And if you, and the point here is that you might want to put in all these people you're looking for's names just in case they show up in some book someplace. Now, it may or may not be correct, it may not be sourced, it may not have everything you want, but it's a simple place to go to search for things and find a lot of information. But here's the point. We're talking about places and times. For you to understand this process, like the historical county in Utah that you mentioned, you know, the one that's disappeared. We've got those in almost every state, has counties that have gone disappeared. What we do is when we focus, we go out to the larger history. You've got to know the history of the area and the place in order to understand where that place is. Now, we can go on maps, stories, and I mean, I just talk for hours about how to find things on maps and how to find all the places there are in the world. I've given whole classes on just on finding things. But what the important point is that all these places in the world can be identified. Historical, existing today, not existing, we've got the information for almost any place you can imagine. Okay, now what's next? Well, if you're really, if you're interested in, let's get rid of this rest of this book. Once you can look over here and you can see that there's all these books. Now, there's another thing you might want to know when I'm going back to the catalog, and that is that when you come up to the catalog, it says OCLC WorldCat is part of the catalog. And any place that I go, let's say Utah, and if I look for a record, and I go down here and it says cemeteries, and I look at cemeteries in Utah, and there's a digital version of this book, but down below that, it clicks, there's a connection, a link to the WorldCat. Now the WorldCat is a combined catalog of all the, not all, but tens of thousands, over 70,000 libraries around the world with over 2 billion catalog entries. And so when you're looking here, what it's going to do is tell you all the other places. Now you'll see right here it's a BYU library, so you could just go upstairs and go pull the book off the shelf and look at it. But in addition to that, what you can do is take that same, the same topic. So you have this one, which is cemeteries in Utah. And you can pop that into WorldCat. And now you have all the places and books that talk about, all the books and documents that talk about cemeteries in Utah. And these are not necessarily on Google, because these are the catalogs from the library, so they're not available necessarily to a Google search. This is in addition to searching for any item that you're looking for. So you might want to put your names of your family members and everything also, not only into Google, into the catalogs and every place else, but you may want to put them here into WorldCat so you see if there's any other books or materials that might be available.
Can you just put WorldCat in, or do you have to put the OCLC or what?
No, it's WorldCat, W-R-L-D,
Yeah, CAT.
C-A-T, just like, you know, cat, and .org. WorldCat.org. It's probably, for genealogists, it's probably one of the most most valuable places to go to look for material. There's probably hardly any place else that I would, you know, this is one of the three big search places that I would use constantly almost every day. The reason I would use this, I mean, it's very simple, because I'm constantly referring and writing about materials. If I wanted to mention this book in a post, I would go up here to Cite Export, and it would give me the correct citation in any format that I wanted. So I'm just automatically getting a citation for that, the correct citation. And I always choose Turabian because it annoys everybody. Because they use APA or Chicago more frequently, or MLA even. But that's okay. Most people say, oh, Turabian's okay, until they are an editor of a journal, and then they won't let you use it anymore. Okay. So then the next question is, what else? Well, if we go over one more link over, two more actually, what we find is that there is a thing called the wiki. Now, what is the wiki? The wiki is just like the catalog, only it tells you everything. So instead of having just a list of words that you're going to be a suggestion to you, these are articles that have been written about each of these subjects and telling you where you can find additional information and how you find that information. And it also tells you everything else you want to know about genealogy. It's been, now there's 79,998, so I'll check if I get home, and then I'll go add 2 more pages so I can do the 80,000 page. Okay, so I was thinking that would already be done by now, so somebody's not watching out there, or they'd be scrambling to put in new pages.
Is the research wiki different than the wiki? Isn't there a...
This is the FamilySearch Research Wiki. It's the wiki.
It's the one you can put stuff into if you want to.
Right. Yeah. And this is the wiki is a program where everyone can contribute. So anyone who is there with signed in can actually help us correct or maintain or add information to this database. So if I put in, for instance, United States here, then I would get a page on the United States as a start, so I'm starting at the top of my pile again. And here's all the different kinds of records that I might find at the United States level with articles about those. So if I took one like business records, for example, then I would look down the list and I would see general online records, and I would see mortuary, farming, slaves, newspapers, union records, mining, business, churches, railroads, shipping, business licenses, all sorts of records that you might search for an individual, and then some guidelines on where to find those records and links out to the sources where those records might be located.
So you would do that before going to a specific smaller locality, like a county or...
Well, yes, and the answer is, why would I do it that way? The question is, why would I do it that way? And the answer is that I start at the big, because I'm either starting at the top. I could start at the bottom, but with the wiki, if you start at the bottom, you've already, there's an assumption that you already have all this information. So the assumption here with the wiki is that you always start at the top and go down, because it will tell you all the general information you need to know about the record, and then you get more and more specific as you go down in the area. So if I go from here, if I say business records here, then it will have, general articles on business records in the United States. And then if I keep coming and get down here, basically I can go to business records in any one of the states. So if I go down to Utah and I look at the Utah list, then I have a similar list of topics of articles in Utah, plus one for each county. And then I can go to their business records list, and this will tell me specific types of business records that may be applicable here in Utah. So where to find the Utah business records. And then if you go from there, I can go to each of the counties, and the question would be then whether or not, so let's say I go to Beaver County, first one here on the list, and then there's another category, a bunch of categories here, including business records and commerce. And in that case, we're talking about the mining industry, and we have a list of mines in Beaver County. So we're getting down into more specific records every time we go down through the list of records. And the difference here is they're explaining to us what the record is, where they're found, and links out to locations where those specific records might be found around the internet someplace. Now, if this isn't correct, so the wiki is interactive, which means if you find something that you need to know, or you see an area on the wiki that you think, well, there really ought to be more records in that, you have a couple of options. The first option is you can go in and add that to yourself. So if you know about a certain area of records, you can go in and write about those records. The second thing is you can always contact somebody like me, and you can just come up here and put my name in. And go to my page, and there you could contact me any sorts of ways. You could send me an email, or you could click on this and send me a message directly. And then you tell me you want me to add that page in the wiki, and then I will start working on it. I've been working on this since about 3 weeks after it started. And I'm on the governance committee and the support team and all that stuff. I'm sort of an ex officio member, in the sense that I float out there. Whenever they get tired of me, we've done a couple of big projects. We worked on the Utah project. Utah was like nothing in there, and I couldn't figure that out. And so I started making noise, and pretty soon they decided they're going to have a Utah project. So they had a Utah project. We went with that with a group of mostly the research librarians from the Family History Library in Salt Lake and other professional genealogist people. And we got together and contributed to this over a period of about 2.5 years. Now it's pretty, not complete, never complete. It's always a work in progress. So you can, this is the kind of thing where you can actually grow and learn more about genealogy. All of these products here on FamilySearch are, you can see they reinforce each other, because you have all the books and materials, and they are all organized by place, but they're searchable by name. And then you have the historical record collections, which are part of the catalog, but they're the ones that are organized by place, so you can look at things by place. And then you go to the wiki, and again, it's organized by place. So the message we should be getting is that finding the place is important, and what we actually do as genealogists, what we should be doing first is always locating where an event occurred before we decide to start going out and looking for records. But the next step would be to look for the records that are available, and then you start looking for people by name, but only after you've identified a place and the records that are important to search. People who go out there and search for names and names and names, they're the ones that get very, very, very frustrated eventually in genealogy, because they're not looking where the place. Okay, well, I think we've gone plenty of time. Oh, go ahead, question.
When we talked about cemeteries, What's the advantage of searching that way? Why wouldn't you go into find a grave or billion graves?
Well, this tells you to go to find a grave.
Oh,
In other words, this is the instructions on what to do, what you just asked. You already know that. That's the kind of information that we share. If it's not there, we say, oh, well, you should go to here because I know this one has it, so you stick that in, because then everybody else knows it.
now how do you have time to answer everybody's question? If we go to this site and ask you a question,
Or you can ask me right now, or you can email me, or you can do anything you want.
okay, all right.
Anybody need the card, want to contact me forever and ever.